and about Terraform or any kind of infrastructure as code. Many people. Today's going to be more of an introduction. We're going to be more discussing about what's serverless, what we're going to use it. Maybe in the end we can have a small demo where I can showcase serverless and Terraform being used together if we have time. So for those who don't know, what is serverless? So serverless is basically the concept of outsourcing the basic management of your infrastructure to a cloud provider. So you're a developer, you don't care how you're going to deploy this, where it's deployed, how the server is built or managed. You just want to deploy your application fast to have something ready in production. And then this has a lot of positive impacts because many developers, they actually don't care about it. Honestly speaking, many developers don't care about it. You just want to code, you want to see your things running. And so, as I said, you don't have management of your infrastructure directly. Because that doesn't mean that you don't have servers, you don't have anything running, but that doesn't mean that you don't care. You're interested in deploying it. I like to call this a service as a service because you are basically interacting with services from your cloud provider. So, for example, in AWS, anything that you don't have to manually provision it, it's considered serverless. So, API Gateway, DynamoDB, Fargate, AWS Lambdas, SQS, even S3 and ETS, they are considered serverless. It's also considered scalable and highly available because, in theory, all the infrastructure available for that service in that region from your cloud provider can be considered your whole infrastructure. For example, a Lambda function can scale to up 1,000 concurrent executions at once. So that means if you get, in theory, 1,000 requests, you're going to be scaled and served 1,000 requests at the same time. And it's really, really fast. And about the high availability, so we all saw that USC stuff one was down maybe last week, but how often that happens? So we saw that once, and then what was the other one? I think by the US and West 5 years ago. So yeah, it's not so often that this happens, so you can have a guarantee that it's going to be highly available. I like this example because it's just like classic architecture where you have the internet and you have a server that serves requests. So what's up? The request comes, the server gets busy with this request, then the server finishes processing it, and then it's free to process more requests. In theory, right now, server can only process one request per time, but yeah. So the problem arises when you need to have this scale. So does your server reach full capacity for processing requests? And then what's going to happen? For example, in AWS, you have elastic load balancers and you have scalable groups. But that happens that AWS needs to know that it actually needs to scale something. So you have this cooldown period where the cloud provider will listen and try to understand if it's actually something that needs to be scalable or not, because it can be something that is momentaneous, or you're suffering a DDoS attack. So it's not going to automatically scale for you. And aside from that, if you're using normal servers, you also have the cooldown period and the bootstrap period, where our server needs to first be launched, needs to install everything, and needs to launch your application. This takes time, and depending on how fast your application is to scale, you might lose requests and sometimes even customers. On the contrary, you have, in theory, this serverless API, where you have an API gateway and Lambda functions on the background processing it. In theory, every time a request comes, it's going to be processed at the same time. So it's really, really highly scalable. Also, we have zero idle capacity. That means that you have no wasted resources. Your resource is only alive, quote unquote, alive during the processing period, and it's theoretically disposed after. So you're only paying for what you're using by the time you're processing things, and not for things that are not being used for you. I say also disposed after in quotes because at least in AWS you have like this mechanism that they will keep the container alive for a while, so they don't have to reboot or process or start everything from scratch, reducing cooldown period, warm-up periods and the cool periods from lambdas, for example. So this is an example where you see a request coming, and it's coming, and things put up, and then they just quote unquote disposed after. Serverless can be cost efficient. That means, I also say like can be cost efficient because when serverless started, people wanted to do everything with serverless. With any hype in technology, anyone wants to do. For example, the latest hype is AI. Let's put AI on a toaster because a toaster needs AI, right? But with serverless was the same thing. So everyone was trying to do, okay, we need to convert our whole application to serverless. And then this led to many bad practices and many high views at the end of the month. But if you architecture your application correctly with conscience of what needs to be serverless, that means that you're gonna have a smaller view at the end. For example, most of the times you don't need a server running, for example, RabbitMQ or Kafka, because it's not going to be if you're not using that all the time. So, for example, if you need to dispatch messages or queues, sometimes you're going to say like, oh no, 10, 50 messages per minute. So by the time that you need it, you can use serverless, and then you're going to be paying for what you're using. And I always say it requires comprehensive architecture, because if you use serverless for everything, you might end up with a huge bill for using serverless on some things that you don't need serverless. This would be a classic architecture where you have the internet, you have a server, you have a database, and you have like a pop server for emails. If you would like to convert this to serverless, you would have something like this. You have an API gateway, Lambda functions, DynamoDB, SNS, SQS, another Lambda to dispatch emails, and SES to send these emails. This is one of the many architectures that you can have, because serverless you can have like this flexibility on what you choose to use. For example, here I could just remove the Lambda for email notification and just dispatch it directly from SQS, for example. But if I would like to do some processing before, I would need this Lambda. Or I could replace my SNS and SQS and use DynamoDB streams directly. So you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of choice on what the services that you use. And this is specific for AWS. For Azure and GCP, for example, you would have some services that do the same thing, but they just have different names. Now let's talk about Terraform. Terraform is what we call infrastructure as code, but you're not actually coding your infrastructure. You're basically coding and writing blueprints of what is the state that you want your infrastructure to reach. For example, here is the code for a Lambda function that I would like to have a name, the initial file that I want, some roles, the handler, the runtime, and some environment variables. Once you run it, it will be converted to a Lambda function. When you have a simpler one with 3 lines of code, you can create an SNS topic. Of course, you would need to also give these permissions to anything, but if you want to see this in the console, this is exactly what you need. And this gives us code reusability, keeping our code base right, because we're going to be able to reuse many of our many of our information that we need for our services. For example, tags. Sometimes you need the same tags for all your services. And if you need to do this manually, you need to go to all your services and give these tags. But with using infrastructure as a code, you can just define a variable and propagate this variable for all your services. For example, we have here locals, which are variables that are local to the configuration itself. And then you can just propagate this to all the resources that you have, for example, instance 1, instance 2. And you also have variables, which are information that come outside of your configuration, and you can do the same thing. One example is if you need to pass variables per environment, and you need to give this to your pipeline. So you pass to a variable, for example, environment dev. And then you can give this tag for dev for all the application or all the resources that have these tags. Another thing that we have is Terraform modules, which is basically bundling code. So you can easily create the same resource with similar configurations with less lines of code. For example, this is the code for a Lambda function that I actually use from time to time. And having a module, instead of writing this, for example, if I have 50 services, 50 lambdas, instead of having to write this 50 times, I would just do this. So converting all this code to this here. And again, if you have to create 50 lambdas by hand, you will have to go to the console and create 50 times. And you are definitely going to make some mistakes alongside that because we are humans and you cannot be expected to do correct 50 times. So, mentioning errors, we are introducing automation and removing the human factor on deploying and managing our infrastructure. This will give us reduced provisioning errors and will give us consistency between environments. Because if you want to deploy the same thing between multiple environments, it's going to be the same thing between multiple environments. Let's say we have an account A, we have an engineer. He starts to provide some infrastructure. So he goes and creates an API gateway, a Lambda function, DynamoDB, gives role and policies to this Lambda, and this Lambda can access DynamoDB. And then the same engineer needs to do the same thing in another account, or another region, but for some reason, he forgot to give policies to this Lambda function. And this causes this Lambda to not be able to access DynamoDB. And I've seen this happen in production, and it's not pretty. And sometimes you just find this out when your customers are using it. Aside from, in counterpart, if you are using infrastructure as code, you just give this code to a ISC runner, and the ISC runner will be able to create the same infrastructure in both accounts with probably no errors. The only thing that you need to remember is that as long as this same services are supported in both regions, you're going to have no issues with that. Theoretically, it's cloud agnostic because you're just learning one code, and you're not going to need to learn a new code for each cloud provider that you're going to have. For example, if you're using AWS CDK, it's specific for AWS. It's amazing. I'm not telling bad things about it. It's amazing. It does a lot of things for you. But the problem is, what if your company decides to move to another cloud provider or decides to implement multi-cloud? And if you already know CDK, you're going to have to learn the other cloud provider specifics to their infrastructure as code. We will give you organizational documentation because now you're not relying anymore on the console of your cloud provider to know what your infrastructure is and what's connected to what. Us as developers, it's much easier for us to understand code, to see code, and Control F and find the resource that we want, instead of like just running around in the console trying to figure out what's connected to what. And we all know that there's no cloud provider console that is intuitive. AWS, if you go in a region, it's already difficult. When you want me to go multi-account or multi-region, then it becomes harder to understand what's happening. So, for example, here you would have your whole infrastructure in a repository, and you have separated by folders. For example, you have all your modules, you have our APIs, you have our buckets, you have lambdas, providers, all in files that you can easily find the connections between them. It can enforce also team and company standards, and it's not about removing freedom of creativity, but it's trying to prevent fatal mistakes to happen. Because we don't want to go through tons of documentation to understand what is allowed and what's not allowed to do. And if you're using infrastructure as code, you can define in modules, or even during your pipeline run in your CI/CD, you can define tools that will prevent from anything bad from running. So you can enforce security policies, security groups, default behaviors, networking, and many more. So if you don't want your server to be able to access the internet, you can define a module that is going to do that by default. And if for some reason developers can find how to bypass that, you can also have on doing your CI/CD running some tools that use scan your code, and say like, oh yeah, this is not allowed, I'm not going to deploy it. And this saves us developers a lot of time, because we don't, as I said, we don't want to go through tons of documentation to know what's allowed and what's not. We want to be told like, okay, I tried to do this, yeah, I'm not allowed to do this, so it's okay, I'm not going to do this. And last but not least, one thing that I really like is versioning of your infrastructure. Easily versioning of your infrastructure. That means, okay, I deployed something to production that is not working well. So for some reason, I removed a policy. And this policy was really important. So instead of going around and trying to figure out what's happening, you just need to revert a commit or a PR and redeploy it. And the ISC runner will be tasked to move back your infrastructure to the state that it was working before. So just as a takeaway, Serverless and Terraform together, they're both tools and that help us focus on development and remove our need to understand how to build infrastructure itself. It gives us faster deployment and provisioning through singular resources, for example, with modules, where you can reuse code. So a Lambda function, and if I want to create three, I just need to do this. And also gives us a better architectural review, because we can easily see what's connected to what, and what we create and what we remove. Let's see, we have 5 minutes. Let's see if we can do this.